Folks, I'm going to back up to part of my text here. There was a famous gentleman named Paul Harvey who used to set up his stories with, and now here is the rest of the story, and end with, and now you know the rest of the story. He was a great American and a great journalist, and he epitomized why a free press is a staple of any free democratic society. We thank you folks for being here. Walt and I kind of feel like Mr. Harvey today because we will be telling some, but not all, of the rest of the story, which you as the press and the public at large did not hear last Thursday. We have had one prior press conference for this matter, and I can assure you this will be the last one we will have until there is a final adjudication in the event that there is a lawsuit. We certainly may issue press releases and the like, but no more press conferences. My partner and I are not in favor of trying cases in the media, but when you have, throughout the course of this matter since May 10, so-called unnamed sources for MPD, and last week's presentation by MPD, before the family and their attorney had received one piece of evidence, including the autopsy report, I think you can understand why my clients want to establish a level playing field. This includes public statements of the Hennepin County attorney along the lines of, if a police officer shoots a gun, it has to be for a legitimate reason. I think you folks know that this type of conduct can taint the jury pool in the event there ever is a jury trial of these matters, and certainly has the potential to affect the integrity of the grand jury process. And we are confident that what we will point out to you today was not laid out for the grand jury. It could not be more clear that one purpose of last week's presentation by the Minneapolis Police Department was to demonize Terrance Franklin. For example, they showed an image of Terrance in an elevator, but don't tell you that the apartment building was the home of the woman he was with when the police attempted to apprehend him. In other words, he was there legally. Also, there is no contention that Terrance had just committed a crime. The vague allegations that he supposedly had committed a crime at an earlier date, and strangely, the man whose home was burglarized, who did not call the police on May 10, actually died in a motorcycle accident just about 2 weeks after May 10th. That man passed away in a completely separate situation. My point is that it may have been difficult to prosecute that case, but certainly just because someone made a phone call doesn't mean Terrance Franklin had anything to do with that crime. And we all know cases of false identity and false accusations can happen, as occurred with the prosecution of Lakavic Chambers by Mr. Freeman's office this last November, a case in which Mr. Chambers was found not guilty on very serious felony charges in less than 2 hours of deliberation. There was nothing that came out in MPD's presentation last week that surprised me or my clients. But what we wanted to know, and we're most curious about, considering the family's contention from the beginning that Terrance never fired a gun, was whether MPD ensured that GSR testing was conducted. It is interesting to note that not one syllable was mentioned about this by any member of MPD in their prepared presentation. It was a reporter that had to ask. In this case, it was Tom Hauser, although I strongly believe somebody else in the press corps would have asked if Mr. Hauser had not. And the response that was received, amazingly, was no. They did not do any GSR testing. How can this happen in a situation like this when you have 2 dead citizens, an unarmed dead black male, a scenario on its face that is specious, even to those who are pro-law enforcement, and a shocking contention that the supposed bad guy shot a police gun? For example, why didn't they shoot him when he was in the process of trying to get the gun? In this case, it's nothing short of unbelievable that the department did not endeavor to make sure that this was done. Wild horses should not have prevented them from doing this. No answer can satisfy any reasonable person as to why this did not happen. For folks at GSR test, I assume you folks know that's a gunshot residue test that can ascertain if a person has recently fired a gun. We will endeavor to find out who made that decision, but I will make this prediction. Getting an answer to that question, even in the formal discovery phase of a civil lawsuit, will be extremely unlikely. Finally, after almost 4.5 months, we received the autopsy report, and that was on our own, through no help of MPD or Mr. Freeman's office. And there is certainly interesting information in that report. Terrance was shot 10 times, although one of the 10 rounds was a grazing round. Of the 9 shots that entered Terrance's anatomy, all 9 had the description of being right-sided. They are these: 1 right ear, 2 right temple, 3 right auricular, which is a part of the anatomy near the ear, so it would be near the right ear, right neck, right parietal, the top of the head, right occipital, which is the back of the head, but again right-sided, right arm, right armpit. The entry room was in the right armpit and the right back. Now, this would seem to indicate one shooter, but I'm very much aware of the fact that MPD is taking the position that there was more than one shooter. It's important to note that the officer who appears to be the primary shooter, as I'm sure you all know, has a track record a mile long of excessive force against African Americans. And think about this. How does a round enter the right armpit? Isn't it reasonable to assume that there is the possibility that this young man's hands were in the air when he was killed? I want to talk about the YouTube video that was posted by Jimmy Gaines. On May 30th, I made some very serious accusations about use of the N-word by MPD officers at the scene of the Franklin homicide. The Minneapolis Police Department took the position that me and my clients were wrong and that we had misinterpreted the evidence. Some rather harsh criticism of the contentions I made that day. We have not backed off from that at all. And considering the revelations from Green Bay and Apple Valley, those events, I would submit, are strong circumstantial evidence to support use of the N-word regarding Terrance Franklin. The bottom line is this. This is how MPD cops roll if they have a young black male in their sights who is attempting to evade arrest. I contend it is normal for them to use that word. The video clip that was widely circulated on YouTube, again taken by Mr. Gaines, has some very important evidence which we strongly presume was not presented to the grand jury. I thought for sure after my May 30th press conference that MPD would contact Mr. Gaines. I practically begged them to. As I am talking to you folks right now, no member of law enforcement or Mr. Freeman's office has ever interviewed Mr. Gaines, nor have they engaged in the reasonable attempt to secure his phone video and engage in forensic enhancement of not only the video but the audio. In addition, Mr. Gaines, for example, could have important evidence other than what he videotaped, the incredibly important act of videotaping, which has resulted in the creation of some very important evidence, which I'll note here in a moment. And Mr. Freeman and Chief Harto call this a thorough investigation. On the relevant video clip, the clip that is on YouTube is just a portion of what Mr. Gaines videotaped. He just posted that portion. You can see a member of the Minneapolis Police Department run from the left side of the house, the home where Mr. Franklin was killed, and he is wearing all black. He's in a black outfit. He's not wearing a helmet or anything, but he's in a black uniform. He runs up to a squad SUV and he says to 2 officers in blue at the 11th second of that clip, "Officer shot." For any of you that don't have that clip, I can get it to you, although I would note for the record that Star Tribune has that clip on their website. He then goes to the back of the SUV and opens the hatch. And after he says "officer shot," either one or both of the officers in blue say, they say 2 questions. The first one is bad, meaning was the officer shot bad? And then the other question was, where was he shot? The point I'm making to you is what you visualize and hear, it all makes sense in the sense that there's activities happening in front of you which make clear that the officer shot statement is in fact a true statement, that at that point an officer has been shot. The officer in black then grabs a black item from the back of the SUV and beelines back to where he came from, exactly the same way, presumably to go around the house to the back of the house. He's in such a hurry that he doesn't even close the hatch, so there's clearly a sense of urgency and it's reasonable to assume that he's bringing some form of first aid to the injured officers. I think there's been references to a tourniquet that was used before ambulance personnel arrived, or that type of thing. But in any event, he grabs something and he goes back, so that's the important point. It is clear from this audio and video that this is a specific line of demarcation as to when we know that an officer has been shot. We, meaning me, my partner, and the experts we have consulted with, are confident that minutes passed from the time an officer was shot until this officer in black appears to obtain the black item. In other words, it wouldn't be reasonable to assume that after an officer was shot, this man would immediately run to get a first aid kit. There probably would be an assessment of the situation. We presume that we'll be able to get further specificity on that. But certainly we have a specific line of demarcation on the video as to the time we know someone has been shot. But here is what I suggest is most important. At the 26th second of the video clip, you hear, quote, "damn freaking nigger," close quote. We are confident this statement is spoken by an MPD officer who is in the basement and is directing that statement to Terrance Franklin. You then hear 1 second later at second 27 these words, quote, "man, let me go," close quote. This is the voice, ladies and gentlemen, of Terrance Franklin. His family has confirmed that, friends have confirmed that, and there is no question that it is his voice. It's important to note that based on the Minneapolis Police Department's version of these events, that young man is not supposed to be alive then. Now, I think I know what you may be thinking. How can a sound in a basement be heard in the front of the house? I remember when this first came to my attention, I just rejected it outright. I want you to understand, I've interviewed the homeowner of that home, and he confirmed for me that all of the windows and doors were closed when this event occurred. I mean, there's a possibility in the back of the house there may have been a door open, but there's a porch there. But importantly, Gaines was doing his videotaping in the front of the house. It was a combination of technologies. The luck that Mr. Gaines decided to videotape, and the reality that someone for MPD in that basement either intentionally or unintentionally keyed a mic on their communication system. The point is, there's no way those sounds could have been heard but for this technology and but for the combination of technologies. As you may know, I forget the make of the phone, but Mr. Gaines had a smartphone that can videotape. What happened then is that the sound came out of the mic of an officer in the front of the house. And you can see in the video there is an officer there. Now I want to be clear about something. There's a possibility that those sounds could have come out of the squad because the hatch was still open. I think there is that possibility. We believe it probably came out of the mic of an officer in front of the house. And the system that the officers in the field use, the officers in blue, is a Motorola device. I'm sure you folks have seen them. Pretty much whenever you see a police officer in the field, they have one. We believe the technology that MPD SWAT uses is the same as the technology as, for example, Washington County SWAT uses. It's a product that's manufactured by 3M. It's called Peltor. Now, it might be a different system. I don't want to say for sure that's what it is. We think that's what it is. But nonetheless, there's no other explanation for how those sounds could have emanated to the front of the house. You'll also notice a distinct difference in the sound quality of the damn freaking nigger quote, and then when Terrance says what he says. The reason for that is because the officer's mic would be closer to his mouth, and then picking up the sound of Terrance Franklin, he would presumably be a little further away. And you'll see the distinction in that sound quality. Obviously, the shots that killed Terrance Franklin, which would have been after second 27, cannot be heard on the Gaines video. The reason for that is that there was no mic in an open position at the time that an officer or officers pumped the 9 rounds into this young man. That obviously would have been something that would have been very loud. You can't hear that. This evidence is solid, and there is much more to support this, which I will not discuss today. We are confident that there will be more help in terms of the evidence in this case with the MPD investigation materials, which, by the way, we just received today. However, I also want to tell you that there is another important fact from the Gaines video. At second 9 to 10, it's hard to hear. We've had the assistance of enhancement. It's hard to hear. You can hear it in the raw video, I believe, if you listen close enough. You hear the name, quote, Mookie, close quote, articulated by Terrance. That was the kid's nickname. He went by the name Mookie with his friends. And obviously it would be our position that he said that name because he was apprehended and somebody asked him his name. Obviously the contention that this young man is apprehended is completely different than the version of the Minneapolis Police Department. I think it's important to note that the "man let me go" statement would indicate not only that he was alive, I mean, he could have said anything and that would have been significant, but "man let me go" would be significant in the sense that would indicate also that he was apprehended. We feel that now is the time for the truth to come out. We seek the truth. That's the primary reason that I've been hired by this family is to find out the truth. I can tell you we plan to commence our suit in 30 days. In the meantime, we will provide this information and other evidence by letter to Ms. Siegel, the city attorney, and we will await a response. We will also ask this specific question and just get it out there, give us an answer. How much time elapsed from the time the officer in black said officer shot from the time he found out an officer was shot? It's possible that could be answered in the investigation materials. I literally got them about an hour ago, so I haven't had a chance to review them, but obviously that is significant. But even giving them the benefit of the doubt, just adding on 15 seconds, folks, that makes it 31 seconds. And remember, he was not yet dead. We just know he was alive at that point. We don't know for sure when, at least in terms of the Gaines video, when it was that he was actually killed. I want you to understand that our constant theme in this matter will be this. If the story of the cops who were in that basement is valid, why is it that Terrance Franklin is still alive at second 27 of the Gaines video? That completes our presentation. We will now answer any questions you have, all three of us. So if you have any questions, please let us know. Thank you.
How recently did Mr. Gaines come to you with this video? I assume that he came to you with it, that's how it was discovered?
No, we found out about the Gaines video through friends and family that had seen it on YouTube, and I think he literally posted it the next day. Now I have interviewed Mr. Gaines at length, you know, it took us some time to figure out the significance. I mean, obviously, when you listen to it, the N-words jump out at you, and I mean, it's really it's disturbing to hear that. You know, we've known about it for a while. You know, and again, folks, I got to tell you, I mean, I just thought for sure that when I made the statements I made on May 30th, I just thought for sure that just as part of the basic investigation process, Mr. Gaines would be interviewed. Now, certainly you can take, and I have a CD-ROM of all the images. Mr. Gaines was kind enough to give that to me. I don't even know if MPD even has that. I assume they don't because they've never contacted them. But if you're doing a proper investigation in a very, very important case, I mean, I think we all know that from the moment this happened, everybody knew. I mean, this was a very high-profile case, very high profile. And I just assumed that they would go to the best source, and presumably that would be the phone. You know, and then, you know, you can do all kinds of forensic things with, that's the term they use when they take video, and you can do stuff with it. You can enhance the images, you can enhance the audio. And what I'm telling you today that's on that video, it's solid. It's rock solid, it's there. You folks will hear it, you will see it. We hope the members of the public look. We welcome scrutiny from anyone. But the bottom line is it's there, it's solid, and it's a problem. I don't see how you can possibly explain this away. You know, maybe they will try. But the bottom line is this makes clear that this young man is alive when he's not supposed to be alive. And it also makes clear that he's been apprehended, which is in direct contradiction to their story. It's lucky we have this. I mean, it took a citizen to, it's a combination here. I mean, you know, if you had somebody that heard it, it would be one thing. That would be important, but what people hear can always be subject to vigorous cross-examination and that type of thing. But the bottom line is it's there, it's recorded, and it was the combination of those two technologies that have created this very interesting piece of evidence. I think the bottom line is when, we live in a world now where it's harder to get away with stuff. I don't care who you are. It's harder to get away with stuff. I think the advent of squad video has resulted in a lot more successful civil rights cases. I mean, I've had cases myself where if it wasn't for squad video, we had no case. So yeah, we've known about it for a long time. We have engaged in enhancement of our own, and but I'll tell you that, and the enhancement further confirms what we hear. But for the family and friends, you can imagine how traumatic that is. This kid's dead, and you're listening to this video, and there's his voice. Man, let me go. It's like a voice coming out from the dead. And I've sat down many times with Sheila and Walt and Terrance's sisters, and it's hard for them, but they absolutely confirm unequivocally that it's his voice. And as a practical matter too, when you hear it, it's clearly the voice of a young black male. I mean, and it's not just his voice, it's his diction, it's his vernacular, it's how he would talk. So it's it's an amazing piece of evidence. It's hard to believe it exists. In fact, when you listen to it, you'll hear a jet go overhead, like 4 or 5 seconds later. If that jet had been 4 or 5 seconds earlier, it would have mooted that sound. There's a lot of, you folks probably know in South Minneapolis, there's a lot of jet traffic. So we feel that we need to point this out, and again, in an attempt to level the playing field. But we are frankly shocked that, I don't know definitively that this wasn't presented to the grand jury, but isn't that reasonable if we know that Mr. Gaines was never interviewed? I'd be very surprised. People say, well, gee, I think the standard line for MPD now is going to be, well, the grand jury exonerated us, case closed. It's not case closed. You have to know what was presented to them. And this one piece of evidence, I would submit, folks, could easily make a difference on the issue of no bill versus bill. I think that's obvious. Anybody else?
So Mike, if he's not dead, or if he's alive, he's not supposed to be alive according to the police version, how does he end up dead?
Well, we feel that, I'm not going to say the officer's name today, but we feel confident that the individual who was the primary killer, or really the person who killed him, was the individual who, I think it was reported in your paper, Matt. Matter of fact, I think your story that pointed out that this officer has 13 cases of excessive force, $700K paid out because of this guy, and he's still on the force. Now, this issue of whether other people shot, I know that that's something that will be significant and probably hotly litigated during the course of the case, but folks, boom, pop, 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 pop. Wait, what do you have, 2 guns right together? Now, you don't need to be a medical examiner or even a first-year med student to know that would seem to indicate that the shooter's in one position, okay? So whether other officers shot, what sometimes happens in a situation like this, I'm sure you've heard of cases like this, I forget what the law enforcement term is, I think it's called mirroring or copycatting, where a cop might begin to shoot, might start shooting, and then another cop hears that, and then he or she thinks, well, he must see something I don't see, and then others start shooting. But the impetus for the shooting can be indicated or delineated, I think, to one person. And I think it's clear that we're going to find that the most, if not the majority of those rounds came out of the gun of that particular officer. Obviously, this is real technical stuff. You got ballistics testing, you got, where did the bullets go, blah, blah, blah. But you got 9 rounds, and every single one of them has the adjective right. That's pretty amazing. Did that answer your question, Matt? I'm sorry.
Well, what was the impetus for his shooting?
It's a good question. I haven't answered that question. I'll tell you what I think it is. I think this officer had a history of being racist. I think he was angry about the situation. I think it was a combination of racism and anger. I think there were 5 reasons primarily why he killed this young man. 1, he was a young black male. Doesn't like young black males, okay? 2, he was suspected of having committed a crime. 3, he had engaged in flight. He was attempting to avoid arrest. If any of you don't think that's a combination for disaster for a young black male in Minneapolis, I suggest you view the DeMario Booker squad video. That will answer a lot of your questions. That's a bad combination if you're a young black male. 4th reason, and this is very, very, very important. When Terrance Franklin attempted to get away, he may have come close to hitting an officer. That officer, all we know is that officer is a woman. I could probably ascertain fairly quickly who that was, but this is a female officer for the department. We believe, told officers in the field, he tried to kill me. Not that he almost hit me accidentally trying to get away. He tried to kill me. You can imagine the additional anger that would create when you already have all those 3 other situations. We obviously believe that the 2 officers that were shot were a result of friendly fire. I think when you have those 4 issues, then you have the 5th issue that you have friendly fire. I think you have an officer that's really angry about the situation, and he blames this young black man, because if he hadn't tried to get away, the situation wouldn't exist. I think it was a split-second anger decision. And I want to be, Mr. McKinney asked a good question. I want to be very clear about this. It's possible we might reach a different conclusion as we proceed forward with investigation. I do not believe, and I don't think the evidence will support, that this was a conspiracy to kill this young man. I think this was primarily the act of one officer. Now, however, I certainly believe that there was a conspiracy to cover up what happened. Now, how many officers and who are involved in that, I don't know. And I hope I'm not implying, I mean, maybe I have, but I'm not saying that every single officer in that basement is part of that conspiracy, although once I read their statements, pretty good feeling. I just haven't had a chance to do that yet. So Mr. McKinney asked a very good question. Let me give you an analogy to I think, explain what happened here. And another factor, and part of the psychology of what happens here, and there have been books written about this, and there's a lot of research on this. Sometimes officers, when they get in SWAT uniforms, they become, and the term that's been coined is militarized. I mean, we know that Minneapolis SWAT officers are already amped up as it is. If you don't believe me, look at that situation in Anoka County where a Minneapolis SWAT officer was off duty, cold-cocked a man, hit a man, and almost killed him. Why? Because he was talking loudly at a table nearby. So we certainly know that they can get angry. And, I think it would be similar to, and I've mentioned this to people, you've probably seen the movie Platoon, where there's a depiction in that movie of it's a mini version of the Melee Massacre. And you come into a village and you think that the villagers have cooperated with the bad guys, the Khmer Rouge, and you're angry about it. And you walk up to someone and you just have all this anger. You think, and maybe the guy smiles the wrong way. Maybe he says the wrong thing. Pop, pop, dead. I think that's the kind of intense anger that was happening here. And we've done a lot of investigation about this officer. I'm not going to tell you what we've learned, but there's more, folks, than just the 13 cases of excessive force, which obviously is very important evidence. But we, like I said, we're not, by any means are we disclosing all of our evidence today, but we felt it was important that you know and that the public know, and obviously you folks are the conduit to the public, that this is not clear-cut. In fact, it's just the opposite. MPD last Thursday made you think that this is clear-cut. we all know that things can happen in life where they seem clear cut. Central Park 5, everybody thought that was clear cut, right? Boy, that was a bad day for law enforcement, it was a bad day for media, and it was a bad day for lawyers, because everybody was wrong. So this is one of those cases where, on its face, it may seem that it's clear cut, but it's not. And I think the evidence, when it's all on the table, as I said last week when I was responding to questions from the media about the grand jury result, that is different. I want to be clear about something. I do not have any criticism of the grand jurors. I hope you folks understand this is not a criticism of the folks that are on the grand jury. I think that you have to base your decision on the evidence that's presented to you, and if the evidence was presented in a different fashion, especially with just a few of the things I pointed out today, and obviously the Gaines video is significant, but you have someone testify about an autopsy report. Well, are you pointing out the significance of that report? I don't know. I said back in early June that I was confident that there would be no indictments of this officer's confident. It was no question. I mean, I don't think there's been an indictment of a Minneapolis police officer in 15 years. So why would we think this would be any different? So certainly the result of the grand jury is completely irrelevant to our ability to proceed forward with a civil lawsuit. I'm sorry, man, go ahead.
No, I was just, sorry.
Anybody else?
No, I was gonna ask.
Matt, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, man.
I think we all kind of get what you're saying. Would like to hear, Mr. Franklin, would you like
Sure.
to say anything at all? I mean, did you hear your son's voice on that tape?
Yes, I did.
Can we slide those mics over in front of him, please? So we
Oh,
can,
yes.
Or you can change places.
yeah, or change
Yeah,
chairs.
why don't you sit here a while?
So when you heard that tape, what did you hear on that tape, Mr. Franklin?
That's what I said.
I heard my son, just what I said, let me go, man, let me go. That was my son's voice I heard. I know my son's voice, like I told you before at the first conference.
Why do you think he ran?
That's a good question. I think I'll handle that one. First of all, when he was in the basement, he called 3 different people. I'm not going to talk about the substance of those conversations, but I will tell you that he knew that there was a whole army of officers after him. Okay, he knew the situation. He had a cell phone, and he knew that.
Can I address the why he ran question as well? And
Yeah,
as an activist, as part
That's
of
fine,
Justice
Mel.
for Terrance.
Yeah, that's fine, Mel. Just let me make this one point. He was on probation, and he was driving a car. He did not have a driver's license. If he was busted for driving without a driver's license, that would be a violation of his probation. It could put him in prison, put him in jail. So, and his son's birthday was coming up, and he didn't want to be in jail for his son's birthday. So we think that's why he ran. We don't know definitively, but we have a pretty good idea why. Go ahead, Mel. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to make a bigger point because some people have asked, well, why he ran, and for me, the two don't come together. In other words, we live in the United States of America with a kind of a constitution, and this is important because I think some people try to make that as a justification for what happened. Terrance Franklin had a right. He should still be sitting here. He had a right to a trial by jury. He had a right to be seen as innocent until proven guilty. So his running really is not important. It's not relevant to what we're talking about today, the truth be told, because the police had an obligation to apprehend him and bring him to jail and let the jury or the attorney, the prosecutor decide his fate from that point. In fact, we see this as a committee as a form of vigilantism. They were in uniform, but they took the law into their own hands. And politically, that's what the problem with this thing is. They took the law into their own hands. Terrance should still be here, and they had no right. It seemed, in fact, folks, you all have the stories now. We have all that. We have the story of the autopsy, and as Mike Padden keeps pointing out, they don't come together. I mean, you have to. It's like a jigsaw puzzle with about 5 pieces missing. The story that the police are telling and the autopsy, you have to admit, don't come together. It's not consistent. Nothing makes sense. And so the other reason we're here is to let you all know that we're going to continue to fight to get justice in this case. That means that we have to take it to the federal level. That's what we're going to do, because we don't believe what the police have said. In fact, I don't even think most of the press corps believes this story at this point, because it just doesn't add up. Okay, how you look at it, how you examine what people said, it does not add up with the facts of the case. It does not add up with the way he was killed. Grabbing his head. Both, in fact, if you notice, you all told the story that was leaked to the Star Tribune initially is a little different than the story they finally told. And they had a few months to actually get it, to kind of get it right or get it more, because they still couldn't do it. They still couldn't do it. Even the last story, which Officer Peterson, I can call his name because that's who they said did the shooting. Peterson grabbed his head, felt in the dark. That's still up close, and it's not on the right-hand side of his head, and it's not at the back. So it's not consistent. And so because it's not consistent, to us it's obvious that an injustice was done here. And, we're demanding, we still are holding on to our demand that the police be prosecuted.
Going back to Mr. Franklin, I'm watching your face. I know you've been consumed by this for months, but seeing now the autopsy reports, the tape, the different pieces of evidence, what is going through your mind?
Same thing I said before, they killed my son. That's what's going through my mind.
What do you want to see, Mr. Franklin? What do you hope comes out of all of this?
I hope justice be served. No justice, no peace.
Is it a certain officer that you'd like to see, or is it certain the department? I mean, what do you want out of this? Do you want this officer taken off the force? Do you want an apology from MPD? What do you want?
I want him brought to justice. That's what I want.
That's a good point, you raise that, and you hear what Walter said, and the committee and Walter have all been speaking with one voice saying, we want the police prosecutor who did this. It's not hard to understand. Maybe that doesn't seem like a realistic demand in our country, where things seem to be slanted against poor folks and people of color and slanted on behalf of the rich. But we can still ask it. We can still demand it's the right thing. If anybody in this room committed a crime, right, we would demand they be prosecuted. So we don't think that the police should be absolved when they do something wrong. They should be held to the same standards that we are held. If we can prove that they indeed killed this kid illegally, we know they did. So that's why we're demanding, again, that the police be prosecuted. This is not rocket science here. Walter has said it, Mike has said it, the committee, we've all said with one voice that we demand the police who did this wrong be prosecuted.
Mr. Franklin, sir, what is your life like now?
It's not the same.
Mike, can I ask you one more question? Sorry.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
What was the technology used to enhance the audio?
I'm not intelligent enough to tell you. I hired audio people that did that for me, and they didn't really articulate for me how they were able to do it, so I apologize. I can't tell you exactly what their procedures were, but they did a nice job, and that's still a work in progress, I would note, folks. So.
And you said there's a portion of it on YouTube. How long is his original raw tape in its entirety?
I want to say maybe, it's not real long, maybe 1 minute and 2 seconds, maybe 70 seconds. It's not particularly long. Like I said, I'm happy to get it to any one of you, but for ease of reference, the Star Tribune has it on their website, and we provided it to them, and they were kind enough to post it so it could be available for people.
I'm just wondering, because I've seen the video and I can't hear anything. So if there was a way for you to explain how we would be able to hear what you're hearing?
Well, I don't know, I just listened to it. You shouldn't have any trouble. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, it's there, we have not had any trouble here, we don't have any trouble hearing it, so. I appreciate that, ma'am, but
I'm just
yeah.
wondering if there's a.
Well, I've tried to pinpoint for you exactly where these sounds are, so hopefully that will be helpful. But those are the things you have to listen to, and it's solid, it's there. So.
By the way, I passed out these earlier to most of you. So the struggle continues, and since there will be a rally and vigil this Friday at 6:30. So it'd be great if you guys can report that. 6:30 at P Plaza downtown, Nicholas Mall tomorrow evening. Friday at 6:30.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
You're good, you're good, you're good, you're good.